Hey there, Doug from TauStats. TauStats is the analytics platform behind the Bittensor network. We also have lots of documentation explaining how the Bittensor network runs and YouTube videos like this one describing in detail different intricacies of the Bittensor network. In this video, I want to walk through the different participants of a subnet on Bittensor. Let's get started. Quick overview. The Bittensor network is built up of a number of subnets, and all of these subnets do a different thing. There's inference subnets, there's prediction subnets, there's compute subnets. We have a video that describes that, and you can watch that. It'll be linked below. But another way to look at subnets is that each subnet is a shop on a high street or in a mall. And while there might be similar subnets, there may be two prediction subnets, or there might be 4 or 5 inference subnets. They're all slightly different. Just like on the high street, there might be 2 bookshops, but one might be a comic book shop and the other might be selling bestsellers. We're talking about what the makeup of the subnets. So let's dig into subnet number 3, which is a mythical violin shop. Inside each subnet, you've got the subnet owner. And I'm showing this by this giant yellow shape. And the subnet owner creates all of the rules, how the subnet's going to work. Kind of like a shop owner decides how a shop might be run. Now, inside each subnet, they're miners. Miners do the work of the subnet. They're performing the tasks to solve the problems that the subnet is trying to solve. If you think about a violin shop, that might be in the back where there are a bunch of luthiers carving out violins and sanding them and, lacquering them up and putting them together and putting the strings on and then getting them ready for sale. Validators take the products of the miners and grade them to see if they're appropriate, if they match the rules of the subnet that you, the subnet owner, have created. Validators also handle all the input and output, any access to the knowledge of the subnet. All of the images you can see here were created on subnet 19. So using the CoreCell app, I gain access to the TauStats and CoreCell validator that gives me access to the miners to create these images. If you think about a shop, the person in the front of the shop who's running the front end of the store decides the prices. How much do these violins sell for? And they also handle all of the sales. When a person comes in to buy a violin, they help them decide which violin to buy and sell it to them. What's the makeup of the validators and the miners? Well, most subnets have 256 slots. 64 of them are reserved for validators, but in practice, it's usually a lot lower than that. So you can see here in this screenshot from TauStats, there are only 20 active validators. That leaves 236 slots for miners. You can see on the screenshot here, there are only 222, and that's because there were a bunch of folks who just signed up to be miners. They're brand new, and they haven't been evaluated yet. So they're sort of Schrodinger's miners. They're not miners yet, but they're going to be miners at some point. Let's talk a little about the tokenomics of being in a subnet. Let's say that subnet 3 makes 25 tau a day. The subnet owner makes 18%, and the rest of the emissions is split evenly amongst the miners and the validators, 41 to 41. We do the math, and you can see what that is in tau. Now, it's important to note that the miner contribution is split up amongst all the different miners, depending on how good a miner the different miners are. We'll get to that in a second. For the validators, most of this emission goes to the stakeholders, those who have staked to the validators. We're going to have a whole nother video on that because there's a lot going on with validators and stakeholders and nominators. But let's go back to our violin shop analogy. We've got these miners. They're making violins as quickly as they can so that they can be sold. They're making the violins based on the rules that you, the subnet owner, the owner of the shop, have decided what makes for a good violin, and they're following those rules. The person in the front of the shop, the validator, is taking all those violins and grading them. which one's the best one, which one's the worst one. And then based on that, they're grading all of the miners. And this is a screenshot from TauStats. And the miners up here are making the most. They're having the best quality content coming out. We've got a lot of folks here in the middle, and then we have some here who are blue at the end. Now, mining is very competitive, and if you're at the bottom, you can be replaced, right? Just like if you're a low performing person at the office, you might get fired and they'll hire somebody new. All of the orange colors are brand new miners. They've just signed up to be violin makers in your store, and they get a bit of time to prove themselves as good violin makers. You can see that some of them have shown up way up here at the top already. They're getting really high scores. They're going to be safe. Many of them will end up down here, and they may get kicked off as soon as their immunity runs out. So mining is very competitive, and the miners are doing the best they can to beat each other to be at the top of the heap. One, they get paid more, and two, they're less likely to be kicked out of the subnet. The validators are doing the same thing. They're doing all of the grading at the front of the store, selling the violins. They're selling the product to folks outside of the subnet. Now you might wonder, why are validators selling it and not the subnet owners? The subnet owners are creating this product, and their goal is to get as many people using it as possible. And one way for validators to, and by validators creating services around the products being created by the subnet, they're making the subnet worth more. So the validators, the subnet owners, and the miners achieve success by making the subnet worth more over time. That was a real quick summary of the makeup and the participants inside a subnet in the Bittensor network. Come to the docs at TauStats at docs.taustats.io to learn more about how the Bittensor network works. And if you want to see a lot of data, you can use our API, or you can just go to taustats.io and look at all the charts and data that we present there. I mentioned in the middle of the video, but all of the AI created images were generated with Subnet 19 using Corcel, and you can check that out at corcel.io. Thanks for watching.